Hey guys, this is your tutorial for Monday, February 15th. Make sure you fill out this attendance link so that we can give you credit for being here today. All right, reminders, keep working on that pedigree chart and genetic disorders vocab because it's due on the 25th. And then turn in today's activities. We actually did two activities today in class. The first one was a story about Chomp, and we filled in a pedigree chart and some Punnett squares. And then we did a Harry Potter activity with pedigrees. So I'm going to start out today going over the Chomp story. So if you would go to the classwork tab and go ahead and get your copy of this assignment out, and we will do it together. Okay, so what I'm going to do is read this story, and we're going to fill in a pedigree chart based off of the tracking of the traits of these little monsters. Okay, once we do the shading in the pedigree chart, we'll write all the genotypes, and then we'll figure out that whether the trait is dominant or recessive, and then we'll say why. And then there's a couple of Punnett squares to fill in with like 3 scenarios, and then we'll move on to the Harry Potter activity. So I'm going to go ahead and get my copy of the Chomp story out, and I'm going to read it to you guys. So I've always been a sucker for the ladies, woo-wee, especially the ones with no fur. One day, a few years back, I saw the most beautiful monster I'd ever laid my eyes on. Crooked teeth, big bulging eyes, long tongue, and best of all, she had no fur. I'm telling you, she was smoking hot. Since I'm a hot-looking guy, I never had trouble picking up women. I decided to holler at her, won her over with my charm, of course, married her, and I settled down. We soon had 2 monster babies, 1 boy and 1 girl. Sadly, they both had blue fur. My son found a wife. I told him he should find a pretty furless monster, but he ended up with a lady with fur. When they had babies, I was delighted that some of their monster children were furless, but there were a few with fur too. Altogether, they had 7 babies, 4 girls and 3 boys. 1 boy and 1 girl were furless. One of the smarter furry granddaughter monsters found her a furless husband, and they married and gave me a beautiful furless great-granddaughter monster. All right. So it looks like we're going to be tracking the trait of no fur. Okay, because he's talking about how he really likes no fur, that's a trait that he wished that all of his children had. So we're going to track the passing of fur down through the different generations of this family. Okay, so he saw the most beautiful monster he'd ever laid eyes on, and she had no fur. So she had this trait that we're going to be tracking. So we need to shade her in because she definitely has the trait. So let's go to our assignment, and we're going to double click on this picture so that we can open up our copy. So this is her and this is the husband. She definitely has the trait of no fur, and to have the trait you have to be shaded in. So we're going to grab one of these and we're going to shade in our circle. Okay, because we know that she has that trait that he really likes. So let's go back to our story and keep reading a little bit. All right, so let's see. Does he have any fur? That's important to figure out. It doesn't say, so let's just keep reading. We soon had 2 monster babies, a boy and a girl, so we're going to see a square and a circle. But they both had blue fur. Okay, so the trait that we're tracking is no fur. However, both of these ended up having fur. Okay, so that means that the dad, he could have been completely unshaded for the dominant trait, or he could have been half shaded and offered the dominant trait to both the kids. So we don't really know what to do quite yet here. So let's keep reading. It says that both of them had fur. His son found a wife, and she had fur too. So she's got that dominant trait of fur. But when they had babies, some of their kids were furless. So 4 girls, 3 boys. 1 boy and 1 girl were furless. So let's go to our pedigree chart. Here's all 7 of their kids. 1 girl and 1 boy have no fur, which is what we are tracking. So let's do 1 girl and 1 boy had no fur. What if they both have the recessive trait, but both the parents had fur, which is the dominant trait? That means both of these parents have to be carriers at least. So we're going to bring the carrier over to mom. I'm trying to get it to where it covers it up good enough. There we go. And we're going to bring a carrier over to dad. Okay, so they showed the dominant trait of fur, but they are carriers because they had children that ended up with no fur. Okay, so that helped us out there. Let's keep reading. All right. One of the smarter furry granddaughter monsters found a furless husband. Okay. So one with fur found a furless husband. This is this one right here. So I got to move this over to pick another daughter that had no fur. We'll say it's her. All right. So this one with fur married someone who was furless. Her husband was furless. So he has that no fur trait that we are trying to track. So we're going to get him situated here. So there he is. Okay. He has no fur, which is the trait we're tracking. The wife has fur. All right. Then it said, they married and gave me a beautiful furless great-granddaughter monster. So the granddaughter that they had right here was also furless, which means that she got one of those recessive traits from dad, and she also had to get one from mom, so mom must be a carrier as well. I'm trying to get this. This is going to drive me crazy. Okay, I give up. Whatever. You guys get the picture, right? Close enough. Who am I kidding? I don't give up. There we go. All right. So based on the story, this is the information that we know for sure. Okay? Any of these other kids, they could be carriers of the recessive trait, but we know for sure they don't have it, right? Because if they had it, then they would be completely shaded in. Okay? So now, once we've dragged the shapes for their cis to go, we have to figure out their genotypes and their phenotypes. So if this person is completely shaded in for the recessive trait, I'm going to use F since we're dealing with fur. I'm going to do little f because they have the recessive trait. But this parent doesn't have it. So they could be big F, or they could be big F, little f. So they could be either. Okay? This one, same thing. They had to have gotten one dominant trait. They definitely got a dominant trait from dad to not have it, but mom had to give lowercase, so actually we know this one. This one would be big F, little f. And we can now half shade it because we know that that one is a carrier. Okay? This one, once it's a carrier, you know that it has one dominant and one recessive. Same for this one right here. One dominant and one recessive since it's half shaded. I just got rid of my text box. There we go. One big, one little. All right. And then they had a daughter that was half shaded, so big F, little f. Married a guy who had the recessive trait, so little f, little f. And their kids showed the recessive trait, so little f, little f. One of the 7 children were, they weren't carriers, but they showed the recessive trait, so that's little f, little f. And then one of the male children had it as well, so little f, little f. However, these ones right here, they had to have gotten a dominant from one parent, but they also could have got a dominant from another parent. So these genotypes could be 2, big F, or big F, little f. Okay, so there's that one. And the same thing for the rest of their kids. Could be 2 dominants or a dominant recessive. Because you see each parent has a dominant. So each one could have given 2 dominants and got big F, or just one parent could have given a dominant and the other gave a recessive. We don't know for sure. Okay, so there we've put in all of our genotypes. I'm going to save and close, and now our picture has updated, right? Do we think this trait is dominant or recessive? Well, I kept calling it recessive, and let me tell you why. If this trait was dominant, if no fur was dominant, then there would be no carriers of it, right? It's not going to be a carrier if we're tracking a dominant trait. Dominant always wins. So if they have the dominant trait, they would all be fully shaded. Okay, so this is definitely a recessive trait, and you can tell because it's not passed on as frequently. Okay, so we're going to say recessive, not passed on as frequently, and there would be no carriers if it was dominant. Okay, so there's my answer for that part. I'm going to highlight it in yellow. All right, so there is A for you. Part B is all about Punnett squares. It says use the information in the story chop and answer these questions below. To edit the actual Punnett square, you just double click on it and then type in what you need to do. Okay, so let's look back at our story under the Punnett square section so we can do the first one. It says, now that you know all about the trait in my family, let me tell you about other traits. Let's talk about my beautiful long tongue. It's good for catching flies. I'm lucky enough to have found a wife with that same long tongue. There's nothing like a fly catching competition on a Saturday night. You see, I'm heterozygous for the long tongue trait. You can call it capital L. And my wife is heterozygous for the long tongue trait. If we have more kids, what are the chances that we'll have a short tongue Mopsy? All right, so long tongue is dominant. They tell us right here, big L is the long tongue trait. He's heterozygous, so is his wife. Remember that hetero means different. So if he is heterozygous, that means he has 2 different letters, one big and one little. His wife was also heterozygous, one big, one little. Okay, to do a Punnett square, you bring the top letters down. So I'm going to drop that big L down, and then my little L down. I don't want a capital L. Stop capitalizing my L's. Maybe I need to change a font. Let's change the font. Yeah, there we go. Little L. And little L. Okay, now we bring our alleles from the other parent across. So I got to bring a big L across and a big L across. And just like a sentence, the capital letter always comes first if you've got a capital and a lowercase. Now in this one, we bring a little L across. So I'm going to bring my little L across. Whoops, got to change my font again. This font's not letting me do little L. There we go. And then bring little L across. So that would be my finished Punnett square. All right, my question is, what are the chances of a short tongue Mopsy? Short tongue is recessive. Are any of these offspring purely recessive, or they show 2 recessive traits? Yes, right? This one box out of 4 can give a short tongue. So 1 out of 4 is 25%. So that's our answer for that one. The next one is about spikes. So let's read about the spikes. It says, that's not the only trait I can brag about. Check out my hot green spikes. These are the babe magnets right here. All I wanted was a girl with bright purple spikes, and you know I found her. I am homozygous dominant for the green spike trait. Call it capital S. And my wife is homozygous recessive, which means she would be little s, little s. What are the chances my little Motsies will have green spikes, which are the dominant trait? They are both homozygous, but one is homozygous dominant and the other is homozygous recessive. So we're going to use S's here. So dad is homozygous dominant, so big S, and mom is homozygous recessive, so she is going to be little s, little s. You drop your big S's down, and then you bring your little S's across. And once again, this is not letting me do little S's. There we go. I don't know why I have to change the font each time, but I do. So we're just going to roll with it. And there we go. So now you can see each one of our boxes has a big S, little s in it. Okay, so our question is, what are the chances? Oh man, I did that under the wrong one. It's okay, I'm going to switch these over. So we're going to drag you. Oh, there's the bell. Up here and you down there. All right, so what are the chances my little Motsies will have green spikes? Remember, green is dominant. So I see 1 dominant, 2 dominant, 3 dominant, 4 dominant. Every single box has a dominant allele in it, so that's 100%. They are definitely going to have that dominant trait. Okay? Now let me pull this other Punnett square down here since I've messed it up. There we go. Good enough. So the last one is googly-eyed traits. Let's read about the googly-eyed traits. How about my eyes? My wife just goes googly-eyed over me. My son didn't have my eyes, but luckily his wife had the googly-eyed trait. Call it Big G. So his wife has the dominant trait. My son is homozygous recessive. Homo means same and recessive is lowercase, so 2 of the same lowercase letters will be his son. And his wife is homozygous dominant, so 2 of the same dominant traits. What are the chances their child will be googly-eyed? Okay, so googly-eyed is dominant. His wife is homozygous dominant. He is homozygous recessive. So we'll do the wife first. We'll do Big G, and he is recessive, purely recessive. So when you do your genotypes, you get Big G, little g. And it's going to be the same in every box, Big G, little g, because you bring a Big G down and a little g across. So you're going to have the same genotype in every single box. Okay? So when you look at your Punnett square, this is what you got. What are the chances their kid will show the dominant trait of googly eyes? I see 1, 2, 3, 4 out of 4 boxes that have a capital G, so 100% that their kid will have googly eyes. Now, he said, what could my genotype be? So he said his son was homozygous recessive. So that means Chomp had to give one of those little G's, right? So the issue is now we need to see if Chomp is dominant or if he's recessive. So does he have googly eyes or does he not? Let's refer back to our story. He says, how about my eyes? My wife just goes googly-eyed over me. My son didn't have my eyes. So his son is recessive. He shows the dominant trait, but he obviously gave a recessive trait to his son. So he has one of each. He would be Big G, little g. And then why would having the short tongue be harmful? Because they like to catch flies, right? You can't have a short tongue to catch flies. That's difficult. That would cause some problems. So there's the answers to the Chomp pedigree and Punnett squares. The next activity is about pedigrees in Harry Potter. Okay, so in this activity, you're going to be doing the same thing we just did, where you read about the different traits and you shade them in based on whether you think the person has it or if they're a carrier, so on and so forth. Okay, so this just gives you a background, a reminder of what squares represent, what circles represent, so on and so forth. Looking at this pedigree chart, we're going to do a little bit of practice here. It shows 3 generations, 1 generation, 2 generations, 3 generations. All right, so the first one's done for you. What are the relationships between 1 and 5? So person 1 and person 5. This is her kid. So 1 is mom, 5 is the son. Okay? 1 and 10 now. So this is the mom, and 10 is down here. So this has to be one of her grandkids, and it's a circle, so it's a girl. So it's grandma and granddaughter. 3 and 5. So here's 3, here's 5. So 5 is a boy. That's 4's brother. and 4 got married. So this is her husband's brother-in-law. So 3, husband, well, we'll just say that they're both brother-in-laws. Okay. 1 and 2. 1 and 2 are a married couple, guys. So this is married female and male. 4 and 5, that's sister and brother. And then 5 and 8, this guy, that's her sister, or his sister right here, and his sister had kids. So a boy, so that's the boy's uncle. So 5 is uncle, and 8 is the nephew. Okay, so there's how you do the relationships. How many grandkids do 1 and 2 have? Well, these are their children. We have to count how many kids their children had. So there's a total of 6. They have 6 grandkids. The pedigree above shows the recessive genetic disorder of colorblindness. Which of the individuals in the family are colorblind? So we have to look at the ones that are shaded in. So that's person 2, person 5, person 7, and person 9. In the family pedigree, the majority of individuals that are colorblind are which gender? Well, they're all squares, so that represents male. And then this is a good indicator that colorblindness is what? It's got to be a sex-linked trait, which means it only affects a specific gender. There you go. And sex-linked traits, it's not necessarily only one gender, but it affects a specific gender. Let me rephrase. It affects a specific gender more often than the other gender. So females can still get it, but it's more prevalent in males. All right, so now that you've had a chance to familiarize yourself with pedigree charts, we're going to look at some Harry Potter information and do some pedigree charts here. Okay? So it says, assume that non-magical ability, so no magic, is dominant, capital M. And to have magical ability is recessive, little m. Okay? A person without any magical abilities is called a muggle. If you're a witch or a wizard, you have magical capabilities. Okay? It even gives you a key here to help you. Number 1 says, if Mr. and Mrs. Weasley are a wizard and a witch, what would their genotypes be? Well, if they're a wizard and a witch, they have magic, and it says magic is recessive. So if they are both showing the recessive trait, they have to be 2 little letters, little m, little m. And then what must be the genotype of their kids? Bill, Charlie, Percy, Fred, George, Ron, and Ginny. Considering that they're all little m, the only thing they can offer is little m's. So there you go. Double click and make a pedigree chart for the Weasley family. Drag the shapes to where they belong. Also drag the names and add genotypes. Okay, so I'm going to click here. The first person we're starting with is Mrs. Weasley. Put her right there. And her genotype is little m. And then Mr. Weasley, we figured, is also purely recessive, so he's little m. They have a lot of kids. So let's do 1. Bring 1 over here so I can space it out evenly. How many kids do they have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Holy cow. So there's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. They have Ron, Bill, Fred, Charlotte. So all of them are boys except for 1. And they all have the recessive trait. So let me pull hers and color her in. We need some dark squares here. So I'm going to color shade these. I'll make sure these are shaded for you guys though. So there we go. He has the recessive one. And I'm going to copy his and just kind of add them to the boys down here because we know that the whole family has the recessive trait that we're tracking. I'm going to do the last one for the girl. So let me do all my boys here. They have the recessive trait that we're tracking. So they are fully shaded in. And then the daughter has it. So you can drag that or copy and paste it. It doesn't matter. So there we go. So this is the girl. I'm going to put it underneath. They are all little m. So I'm going to go ahead and just edit all of them and put little m, and drag them where they need to go. Because they were only given one chance to get recessive and one from dad to get recessive. So each parent could only offer a recessive trait. So no matter what, these kids had to show the recessive trait. They didn't even have a chance to get the dominant trait. Okay, so there you go. That would be what your pedigree chart would look like. I think it brought it all the way down here. Yeah, there we go. So number 4 says, now let's look at Hermione's family. Hermione is a witch, which means she's purely recessive because she has magical ability. So little m. But her parents are both muggles. So both of her parents don't have magic, but yet they passed on magic. So they must be heterozygous, carrying a dominant and a recessive. Okay, so based on the information above, is Malfoy correct in calling Hermione a mudblood? And that term would imply that she is a mixed or heterozygous for magical ability. No, Hermione is not mixed. She's a purebred. She's not heterozygous. So no, he's not right. She is purely recessive. Double click now and make a pedigree chart for this family. So we determined that Mrs. Granger was heterozygous, and so was her husband. So there's dad because he's a square, and there's mom because she's a circle. And now we have to shade our things, and they're both half shaders. Okay. Oh wait, he doesn't need a circle. He's a boy. So he needs to be half shaded. So let me insert a line here. And then, okay, I can't half shade him right now because I don't have time in this tutorial so long. Just know he should be half shaded, okay? Okay, he should be half shaded. I don't have a tool to pick from down here. I'll add it for you guys. They only had one kid, one singular kid, okay? And it was Hermione. She's a girl, and she has the purely recessive trait of having magic, so she is going to be little m. Okay, and just know this guy should be half shaded. All right, now it says Harry is a wizard. His father James was a wizard, and his mother Lily was a witch. So all of them have this recessive trait. Both of James' parents, which is the dad, both of his parents had magical abilities, but Lily's parents did not. Neither did her sister Petunia. Petunia is married to Vernon. They have a son, Dudley. None of the Dursleys have magical powers. Holy cow, this is going to take a hot minute. So it looks like we're going to start with Harry's dad. And we have to do Harry's dad and Harry's dad's dad, Harry's mom's parents. Okay, this is going to take a hot minute. All right, so we're going to start with... We're going to make this stuff shorter because we kind of have to make room for everybody. But we'll make sure you guys' is already shorter for you so you don't have to worry about it. All right, so I'm going to start with James's family. Okay, so this is going to be James's family. And then I'm going to do his wife's family over here. And just add all the necessary components. And then we'll be able to get started and do their genotypes and phenotypes and fill this whole thing in. So we're going to start with James's parents. So this is James's mom right here. And this will be James's dad. And I'm going to do him underneath. Lily's mom be right here. And then Lily's dad, I'm going to do underneath. Okay, now let's go back to our story and read a little bit because this is definitely one we're going to have to go back and forth to. So his father James was a wizard. His mother Lily was a witch. Both of James's parents had magical abilities. All right, so both of James's parents had magical abilities, which means they're purely recessive. So James's mom is purely recessive, and once again, I gotta color in this thingamabob. There we go. So now we know their genotypes. Little m, little m, little m, little m. Okay. And then it says, what do we know about Lily's parents? It says Lily's parents did not have magical abilities, but Lily did. Right? So they both have to be carriers. If they had one kid that had it and one kid that didn't, so both of these of Lily's parents had to be carriers. Okay. I see what's happening here. We need to bring you to the front. So we're going to put you in the front. There we go. All right. So there we go. There's Lily's mom. Okay. Her dad has to be the same. He has to be a half shader. Just know that this should be half shaded. But I don't have the time to do it because this is taking forever. Okay, there we go. So we know that Lily's parents, they had Lily, and they also had Lily's sister. So I'm going to shorten this line a little bit because we don't need it that long. There we go. So they had Lily, and they had Lily's sister. Lily is able to be magical. So she has magic. We're going to take her and go ahead and put her right here, and we know that she would be purely recessive because it's a recessive trait. Her sister, Petunia, did not have the ability to be magic. So she's either going to be a half shader or fully shaded. We don't know yet. So I'm just going to pull a half shade over there for right now and put her as big M, little m. And we might have to change that based on what her kids are like. All right, so let's save and close, read a little bit more. It says that Petunia married Vernon Dursley. They have one son. None of the Dursleys have magical powers. So none of them have magical powers. So Petunia got married. Let's move her information over here. So she got married to Mr. Dursley. He is not able to have magical powers. Neither is their son, Dudley. So Dudley's the son, Vernon's the husband. So he could be big M, or he could be big M, little m. We don't know. And the same for Dudley. Because either way, the mom could have given him a little m, and the dad gave a capital. We're not sure. So we have to include both there. And we're just going to leave them both open shaded. Okay. So now let's go back to James's family. They just had James. Like he was the only one that they had, right? So I'm going to just kind of do a bracket going down right here. Just so I can connect to Lily in a second. So the dad, James, he clearly is able to have magic. He marries Lily. Okay, so let's pull James over here. He is recessive, marries Lily. They have Harry, who is able to have magic as well, which is purely recessive. So we need to pull that there and add that Harry is little m, little m. There we go. Holy guacamole. So that is semi what our finished product would look like. Jeez Louise. All right, are there any questions with this one to answer? No, there are not. Perfect. Holy cow, I'm done. If you have any questions, ask your teacher because I've done all I can. I hope you guys understand, and if you don't, let us know so we can help you. Thanks.